At first sight, the imagery is striking and even unsettling. Solomon, the third king of Israel, seated as judge while misshapen demons surround him, compelled to serve his will in the construction of nothing less than the temple of the Israelite God. This image, so familiar from medieval art and occult manuscripts, immediately raises a question. How did a biblical king come to be remembered as a master of demons? How did Solomon become the archetypal occult ruler? The association of Solomon with esoteric power stretches back centuries, indeed millennia, and has deeply influenced religion, art, and magical practice. From the Hebrew Bible to early modern grimoires, such as the Lesser Key of Solomon, his name became inseparable from arcane wisdom and supernatural authority. To understand this transformation, we must trace Solomon's image from its earliest biblical origins through its gradual expansion into legend, magic, and occult tradition. In the Hebrew Bible, Solomon first appears as the third king of the ancient kingdom of Israel, ascending the throne after a politically fraught succession following King David. Early in his reign, Solomon travels to Gibeon, where he makes sacrifices and undergoes ritual incubation, sleeping in a sacred space in order to receive divine revelation through dreams. In this dream, Solomon confesses that he lacks the knowledge necessary to rule. He does not know how to go out and come in, a phrase suggesting inexperience in leadership and warfare. Rather than asking for wealth or power, he asks Yahweh for a listening heart, the ability to discern good from evil and to judge the people justly. This request pleases God, who grants Solomon extraordinary wisdom, Elohim, divine wisdom, along with riches, glory, and the promise of a long life, provided he remains faithful. This wisdom is immediately dramatized in the famous judgment of the two women and the disputed child, establishing Solomon as the paradigmatic wise king. The biblical text then expands on his reputation, his administrative skill, his international renown, and his knowledge of nature itself, plants, animals, birds, reptiles, fish, and by implication, the very structure of the cosmos. Solomon's reign reaches its apex with the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, the central sanctuary of Yahweh. Later legends would claim that demons assisted in this monumental task, but notably, no such account appears in the Hebrew Bible itself. Instead, Scripture presents Solomon as a divinely sanctioned ruler whose wisdom surpasses even that of the Egyptians, long famed for their esoteric knowledge. At the same time, his story becomes fertile ground for legend. His encounter with the Queen of Sheba, his alliance with Hiram of Tyre, and his magnificent throne all contribute to an image of almost mythic grandeur. Yet Solomon's narrative ends as it began, with a divine dream, but now one of warning. According to the Deuteronomistic editors, Solomon's many foreign wives lead him into idolatry, and his apostasy brings about his downfall and the future division of the kingdom. Other biblical editors, such as the chronicler, present a more sanitized portrait, emphasizing Solomon as a builder and downplaying his moral failings. These layers suggest that Solomon's image was already being reshaped and reinterpreted within Scripture itself. Historically, the evidence for Solomon as a powerful monarch is limited. Archaeology suggests that Jerusalem in the 10th century BCE was a small settlement, and no inscriptions directly name Solomon. Many scholars therefore view his biblical portrayal as highly exaggerated, a semi-historical ruler transformed into a legendary figure. But this lack of concrete historical detail only made Solomon more adaptable to myth-making. The real transformation of Solomon into an occult figure begins during the Hellenistic period, when Jewish texts were translated into Greek. In this process, Solomon's wisdom was reinterpreted using Greek philosophical categories, such as Sophia and Phronesis. His proverbs and songs were rendered with terms that carried astrological, philosophical, and even magical resonances absent in the original Hebrew. Solomon was no longer merely a wise Near Eastern king. He was becoming a Hellenized sage. At the same time, Jewish apocalyptic thought flourished, placing increasing emphasis on angels, demons, and exorcism. Solomon was drawn into this world through traditions that presented him as a master exorcist, inheriting and surpassing even David's power to expel harmful spirits. Texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls already associate Solomonic psalms with exorcistic rituals involving divine names, and the interrogation of demons. This tradition crystallizes in works such as the Testament of Solomon, where Solomon gains a magical ring that allows him to bind demons, interrogate them, and force them to labor in the construction of the temple. Each demon reveals its name, function, astrological associations, and the angel capable of thwarting it. The historian Josephus reinforces this image, describing Solomon as the founder of an exorcistic science and recounting public exorcisms performed using Solomonic incantations and rings. Early Christianity inherited this Solomonic legacy with tension. On one hand, Solomon was acknowledged as the first to subdue demons. On the other, Jesus was presented as a greater and purer successor. As a result, Solomon occupied a liminal space, effective, powerful, but theologically ambiguous. This ambiguity appears clearly in early amulets and magical texts that invoke both Christ and Solomon side by side. By late antiquity, Solomon had become a universal figure of supernatural authority across Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions. In the Quran, he commands the jinn, animals, and even the wind, but only by God's permission and never through forbidden magic, a clarification that suggests how widespread the contrary belief had become. Thus, Solomon's image evolved from wise king to occult master. His combination of divine wisdom, moral ambiguity, and association with supernatural beings made him the perfect vessel for esoteric tradition. Where explicit teachings were absent, later generations supplied them, producing the vast corpus of Solomonic magical handbooks that would dominate Western occultism for more than a millennium.